The radio crackled to life, just after sunset. "Unit 7, if anyone can hear this, I need help." The transmission was weak, buried beneath layers of static, but I recognized enough to know it was coming over a Forest Service emergency frequency. Then the voice said something that made me stop walking. "I'm at Tower 4. The problem was simple. Tower 4 had been abandoned for almost 15 years. I looked down at my radio. No call sign, no ranger identification, just the sound of slow, heavy breathing. Then, silence. I should have reported it and waited for backup. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight, climbed into my truck, and headed toward the old fire lookout. Looking back, I still wish I hadn't. I'd worked as a park ranger in the Appalachian Mountains for nearly 9 years. Most people think the job is all about helping lost hikers or checking campsites. And sure, that's part of it. But the real work happens on forgotten Forest Service roads, the ones hardly anyone uses anymore. Places where abandoned cabins, washed-out trails, and old fire towers still stand, because tearing them down would cost more than simply leaving them behind. Tower 4 was one of those places. It sat alone on a forgotten ridge, overlooking miles of dense pine forest. Nobody staffed it anymore. The stairs had been declared unsafe years earlier. Even hikers stayed away from it. By the time I reached the access road, the last of the daylight was fading. Fog drifted between the trees like slow-moving smoke. I keyed my radio. No visual yet. Investigating possible distress call. Dispatch answered almost immediately. "We don't have any ranger assigned to Tower 4. "I know." There was a brief pause, then her voice came back, quieter this time. "No, listen carefully. We never received any distress call." I stared at the radio in my hand. I knew what I'd heard. That transmission had definitely come through. Before I could answer, a blast of static erupted from the speaker. "Please, hurry." The same voice, only this time, it sounded closer. Then everything went silent again. That's when things started getting worse. The gravel road ended about half a mile from the tower. The rest of the way, I had to cover on foot. The forest felt wrong. No birds, no insects. Just the soft crunch of my boots sinking into damp pine needles. About 10 minutes into the hike, I spotted footprints. Fresh boot prints, heading toward the tower. Nothing unusual about that. Until I realized there was only one set. No return tracks. Whoever had walked in had never walked back out. I followed them uphill. Slowly, the abandoned tower emerged through the fog. Its weathered wooden frame leaned slightly to one side. The staircase looked rotten, but somehow still standing. The windows reflected the last traces of evening light. Then, I saw someone. A figure stood inside the lookout room, perfectly still. I raised my flashlight. "Forest Service, you called for help?" No response. The figure didn't move, didn't wave, didn't react. It just stood there. I tried my radio again. Nothing, only static. So I started climbing. Every step groaned beneath my weight. Halfway up, the figure disappeared. It didn't walk away. It didn't duck down. 1 second it was there. The next, it was gone. I reached the top, expecting to find an injured ranger. Instead, the room was empty. Dust covered everything. Old maps, broken radio equipment, a rusted stove, no footprints, no backpack, nothing. The windows were coated in years of grime, except for one small section. The dirt there had been wiped away. Freshly. Someone had looked out that window not long ago. I searched every corner. Nothing. Nobody. Then my flashlight settled on the old radio console. The power cables had been ripped out years earlier. There shouldn't have been any way for it to work. But then, A burst of static crackled from one of the small speakers. "You're late." This time the voice was clear, male, calm. It didn't sound frightened anymore. I slowly backed away from the radio. There was no power source, no batteries, nothing connected to it. Then, I heard footsteps below the tower. Slow, heavy. Someone was climbing the stairs. Relief washed over me. Backup, finally. I stepped toward the railing. "I'm up here." The footsteps stopped. Silence. I waited. Nothing. I aimed my flashlight down the staircase. No one. Then, another step. One level below. Another. Closer. The sound kept coming. But there was nobody there. Each wooden plank groaned beneath an invisible weight. I drew my sidearm. "Show yourself." The footsteps stopped again. The entire forest went silent. Not just quiet. Silent. Then, out beyond the trees, something smiled at me. It wasn't close. Maybe 60 yards away. Just a face. Barely visible through the fog. Far too pale. Far too still. I blinked. It was gone. That was enough. I decided to leave. Immediately. As I made my way down the stairs, I noticed fresh mud on one of the steps. Then another. And another. Someone had definitely climbed those stairs recently. But something wasn't right. The spacing between the footprints was impossible. Each step landed nearly 6 feet apart. No person could move like that. I reached the bottom and started walking. Fast, not running. Running gets people hurt in mountain terrain. The fog had grown thicker. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. Then my radio crackled again. "Don't go back that way." The voice was so close. It sounded like someone had whispered directly into my ear. I spun around. Nobody. The speaker hissed once more. "He's waiting." I swept my flashlight across the pines. Nothing. Then something moved. It slipped between two trees in one smooth motion. Too tall. At least 7 feet. Long arms. No sound. Before my flashlight could catch it, it was gone. Every instinct I had screamed at me to keep moving, so I did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was walking with me, just beyond the tree line, always hidden, always keeping pace, close enough that I could almost hear it breathing. Then things became even worse. The trail back to the road should have taken 20 minutes. I'd been walking for nearly 45, but the road never appeared. Instead, I stepped back into the same clearing. Tower 4 stood right in front of me. The same broken staircase, the same leaning frame, the same silent lookout. I pulled out my GPS. No signal. I checked my compass. The needle spun endlessly. I knew these woods better than most people ever would. I'd patrolled them for years. Getting lost like this should have been impossible. Then I heard it. 3 short whistle blasts. The official ranger emergency signal. It came from somewhere downhill. "Hold on," I shouted. "I hear you." Without thinking, I ran toward the sound. After about 100 yards, I saw another ranger. At least, I thought I did. Green uniform, ranger hat, radio clipped to his shoulder. He was standing with his back to me. "Hey!" No response. I moved closer, 15 feet away. "Are you okay?" Slowly, he turned around. At first, everything looked normal. The uniform, the badge, the hat, everything. Except his smile. It was too wide, too perfect, too still, and his eyes. They never blinked. Then he spoke, using my voice, perfectly. "I'm at Tower 4. The exact same words from the first transmission. Every syllable, every pause. Exactly the way I'd heard them earlier. I froze. He tilted his head, still smiling. Then, his mouth slowly opened wider and wider, far wider than it ever should have. I ran. I didn't look back. I don't know how long I ran for. Branches lashed across my face. My lungs burned. Every breath felt like fire. The radio erupted with overlapping voices. Some sounded like dispatch. Some sounded like lost hikers. Some sounded exactly like me. Fragments of voices crashed over one another through the static. Help! Where are you? Don't leave. I'm at Tower 4. I couldn't tell which voice was real anymore. Then, through the trees, headlights, my truck, parked exactly where I'd left it. I threw open the driver's door, jumped inside, slammed it shut, and locked every door. The engine roared to life. As I turned the truck around, the spotlight swept across the edge of the forest. 3 figures stood there, perfectly still, all wearing ranger uniforms. None of them moved. None of them spoke. Something immediately felt wrong. Then I realized what it was. None of their uniforms had reflective patches. Every real ranger uniform reflects light. These didn't. One of them slowly raised an arm, not to wave, not to signal, just pointing, straight back toward Tower 4. I didn't wait to see anything else. I pressed the accelerator and drove. I never stopped, not once. Not until the lights of the ranger station finally appeared ahead of me. The next morning, my supervisor went through the radio logs. Nothing. No distress call. No emergency traffic. No transmission on our frequency at all. It was as if the entire night had never happened. He called it equipment interference. A glitch. A false signal picked up from somewhere in the mountains. For a moment, I almost believed him. Until maintenance inspected my truck. They found something on the passenger side window. Fresh fingerprints. Long. Thin. Too long to be human. No matches in the system. A week later, Tower 4 was permanently closed. The access road was blocked off. Officially, it was due to structural instability. Unofficially, nobody wanted to explain why multiple rangers had been reporting radio traffic from equipment that hadn't existed for over a decade. 6 months later, I transferred districts. I never went back to that mountain. But sometimes, late at night, my handheld radio turns itself on. Static fills the speaker. And then, I hear my own voice, calm, steady, exactly the way I sounded that night. Unit 7. A long pause. I'm at Tower 4. I throw the batteries away every time. It never matters. The radio always comes back on. And I still don't know who is answering when it does.